Good morning or afternoon, everyone. My name is Yusuf Ali, and I'm here to present One Country, Two Languages, the case of bilingualism in the United States. First of all, I just want to apologize for not being able to address you in person. Unfortunately, there was an unavoidable schedule conflict causing me not to be present there with you. In lieu of this, I've made this YouTube video in hopes that you will be able to see and consider my ideas anyway. And since I have extra time, I'm going to be doing something different. I'm going to actually be presenting in Spanish and English. And for those who are watching online, I actually have timestamps in which I start speaking in English. So if you don't understand Spanish, you can click the timestamps and skip those parts, and, and hopefully all will go smoothly. Uh, uh, Voy a hablar en español también y voy a incluir los tiempos en que hablo inglés en la descripción del video con mis fuentes también. Y vamos a empezar ahora. Okay, before we start this discussion, we have to define bilingualism. And the term is equivocal, with its meaning changing depending on context. For individual people, it simply refers to speaking more than one language, two languages. For example, a person who speaks Spanish and English is bilingual. And it can also mean a state or government that recognizes two official languages. And in this presentation, we'll be using the second. Necesitamos empezar con la definición del bilingüismo. Vamos a usar la definición que dice que es un estado que reconoce dos lenguas como oficial. Y para seguir, this is my thesis. It goes like this. There are clear trends indicating a rapid increase in the United States Spanish-speaking population. The status quo of de facto English only is not viable in the long term, and the correct response to such a change involves improving Spanish education for English speakers and creating a bilingual state. Without any doubt, a society in which the people can understand each other will become more cohesive. Furthermore, bilingualism would establish a more inclusive national identity, resulting in a more united country. Finally, this inclusion would prevent potential divisions between Hispanics and English speakers, establishing a stronger country. En español, hay tendencias claras que indica un crecimiento rápido en la población hispanohablante en los Estados Unidos, y el status quo de English only no es viable, y la respuesta correcta al cambio es mejorar educación española para los anglohablantes y crear un estado bilingüe. Sin duda, una sociedad en que la gente puede entenderse sería mucho más cohesiva. Es más, el bilingüismo establecería una identidad nacional más inclusiva, resultando en un país más unido. Y finalmente, esta inclusión prevendría divisiones potenciales entre los hispanohablantes y anglohablantes. Okay, regarding the demographic realities and trends, as of this presentation, there are nearly 50 million people in the United States that speak Spanish either as a first or second language, and these people are primarily concentrated in the southwest of the country, as you can see on the map on the right. And furthermore, many studies predict that this percentage will increase to 24% in the year 2065. That's a quarter of the country. And furthermore, whites will not maintain their majority status according to these. They'll instead be a plurality of the population. In other words, the largest minority. En español, hay casi 50 millones de hispanohablantes en los Estados Unidos, y ellos están muy concentrados en el suroeste del país, y hay muchos pronósticos que nos dicen que crezca a un cuarto de la población en el año 2066, y es más, los blancos no van a mantener su mayoría según estos pronósticos. para seguir. Now, how to respond. Naturally, this change causes a lot of debate about how to respond to such a reality. On one hand, there are people who perceive a threat to their culture and will thereby resist any attempt to accommodate bilingualism or the Spanish language. And on the other hand, some will embrace these changes and advocate steps towards more bilingualism. Naturalmente, hay mucho debate sobre la respuesta correcta al cambio que acabamos de describir. Por un lado, hay personas que perciben una amenaza grande a su cultura y van a resistir ningún trato de aceptar el bilingüismo. Por el otro lado, hay muchos que abrazan el bilingüismo y abogan por muchos pasos a esa dirección. A threat to national identity. The late political scientist Samuel P. Huntington wrote a book, Who Are We?, in which he addresses what he believes to be challenges to America's national identity. And in his opinion, bilingualism is one of those challenges, and it would create a situation in which Hispanophones have a relative advantage over Anglophones. And here's what he says. Because most of those whose first language is Spanish will probably have some fluency in English, English speakers lacking fluency in Spanish are likely to be and feel at a disadvantage in the competition for jobs, promotions, and contracts. And for that reason, Huntington considers bilingualism to be a divisive prospect and is completely against it. Según el científico político Samuel Huntington en su libro ¿Quiénes somos?, el bilingüismo sería una idea mala porque en su vista va a imponer una desventaja institucional en contra de anglófonos por el hecho que no pueden hablar español, pero los hispanófonos pueden hablar inglés. Por lo tanto, está completamente en contra del bilingüismo. Para seguir. Now, responses to Huntington. Many other academics accuse him of creating a false division between the two. Furthermore, many consider the idea of a language as a threat to simply be language panic. For example, one writes, quote, stigmatizing the Spanish language as a divisive factor reveals racist animus from Professor Huntington. And speaking a third or fourth language is a sign of culture in all of the world except in the monolingual Eden that Huntington invented. Naturalmente, muchos otros académicos completamente estaban en contra de las ideas de Huntington. Es más, muchos simplemente consideran la idea que una lengua podría ser una amenaza como language panic. Y alguno escribe, estigmatizar la lengua castellana como un factor divisivo revela ánimo racista de profesor Huntington, y hablar una segunda o tercera o cuarta lengua es un signo de la cultura en todo el mundo excepto el Eden monolingüe que ha inventado Huntington. Para seguir, about my thoughts on Huntington's argument, I say he absolutely does have a point when he argues that monolinguals would have a disadvantage in a bilingual state. However, one thing to note is that such a disadvantage would exist regardless of the official status of the country. It's always better to speak two languages as opposed to one. And the more appropriate response to the inevitable changes is not to represent bilingualism as a potential threat, but rather try to bridge the divide by improving the education of English speakers for Spanish en español. Y Huntington absolutamente tiene razón en el sentido que un estado bilingüe crearía una desventaja en contra de personas monolingües, pero necesitamos entender que esta desventaja existiría sin distinción del estatus oficial de un país. Y la respuesta más apropiada es tratar de crear un entendimiento entre las dos comunidades en lugar de crear un sentido de miedo. Para seguir, the Canadian example. Of course, when talking about bilingualism, we can't just make a moral case just like we did in the previous slides, but we have to address practicalities of implementation. And one key question to ask, is there a country in a similar situation as the United States that has successfully implemented bilingualism? And we need look no further than America's northern neighbor, Canada. And on the right is actually a picture of me at one of America's most famous bilingual universities, the University of Ottawa, or in French, Université d'Ottawa. And in Canada, I was actually working in the parliament in part to observe bilingualism working up close. El ejemplo canadiense. Por supuesto, no es suficiente simplemente argumentar por el bilingüismo con razones morales. Necesitamos usar argumentos prácticos también. Y por lo tanto, una cuestión natural es, ¿hay un país en una situación similar compara con los Estados Unidos que tiene un sistema bilingüe? Y yo pienso que un ejemplo bueno es Canadá, que está al norte de los Estados Unidos. Y en esta foto estoy en la Universidad de Ottawa o la Université de Ottawa, que es una institución bilingüe, y en Canadá trabajaba en su parlamento para observar el bilingüismo. Y para seguir, time for parallels between the two countries. Both countries will have an English-speaking minority with a significant linguistic minority comprising more than 20% of the population. That's according to the studies we cited earlier. And furthermore, both of these minorities are primarily concentrated in specific parts of the country, Quebec for Canada and the Southwest for the United States. Y hay muchas similaridades entre las situaciones de los dos países. Según los pronósticos, ambos países van a tener una mayoría que habla inglés con una minoridad significante de hablantes de la segunda idioma. Y es más, las dos minoridades están muy concentradas en ciertas partes de sus países, Quebec para Canadá y el suroeste para los Estados Unidos. The role of education. Now, though Canada was always de jure bilingual because of its constitution, the process of implementation was actually relatively complex and multifaceted, and it accelerated under the leadership of Lester Pearson and Pierre Trudeau, who just so happens to be the father of the current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. And furthermore, both of these leaders recognized the role of education in the development of a bilingual society, and this led to the proliferation of language immersion schools throughout the country. Basically, these are schools in which parents send their children to learn the other language by immersing themselves in it. And to this day, parents aspire for their children to attend these schools because they're known for their academic quality. Como el papel de educación. El proceso de la implementación del bilingüismo en Canadá es relativamente compleja, pero sabemos que la educación tendría un papel muy importante en el proceso. Y un ejemplo específico son las escuelas de inmersión lingüística, y hoy en día muchos padres tratan de educar a sus hijos en estas escuelas por el hecho que tienen uh, calidad superior con compra con las escuelas normales. Para seguir, language immersion in the United States. The schools that we described on the previous slide are increasing in the United States. In fact, there are over 1,000 in the United States, which is a very big increase over what was previously. And the vast majority of the kids attending these schools come from English-speaking families. In other words, it's English-speaking parents who want their children to learn Spanish in addition to English. And many of these were instituted after previous bans on such type of education, which indicates reversal of Spanish-speaking sentiment that may have been present earlier. Y como escuelas en los Estados Unidos hay más de 1,000 y y representa un crecimiento muy grande. Y la gran mayoría de estos estudiantes vienen de casas que solamente hablan inglés y de hecho muchos de estas escuelas vendrían después de leyes que las prohibían, que indica un crecimiento en el sentimientos anti-hispanos que existían en los Estados Unidos. Para seguir, the elephant in the room. Of course, no analysis of bilingualism in the United States would be complete without addressing the current political situation. And admittedly, there is no realistic prospect of progress on this issue with the current administration. In fact, many argue that xenophobia was a large factor in ensuring the election of the current president. All this said, there may be some hope despite the madness. Claro que necesitamos lidiar con la situación actual política de los estados, y si no hay una prospecta realista del progreso en este asunto con la administración actual. Y de hecho, muchos dicen que sentimientos anti-hispanos eran factores muy grandes en la elección del presidente actual. Al mismo tiempo, tal vez hay razones que debemos esperar un poco en la situación actual. Para seguir, reasons to be optimistic. There's undeniably resistance to the aforementioned changes in the United States. And however, the mere existence of the debate regarding the Hispanic population is indicative of the fact that they are becoming more important. The only thing is people are trying to figure out how to respond to that, and some are opposing it whereas some are supporting it. And furthermore, there's good reason to believe that the present setbacks are only temporary anomalies on a much larger trend towards a more inclusive and multicultural country. A pesar de la situación actual política, hay muchas razones que debemos ser optimistas. Simplemente el hecho que el debate sobre los hispanos existe en los Estados Unidos indica el hecho que su papel está creciendo, ¿no? Y en otras palabras, mucha gente tratan de pensar de la respuesta correcta, aunque hay un poco de la oposición. Y cuando profundizamos en la opinión popular, podemos concluir que la situación actual es la excepción en la tendencia general a una sociedad más inclusiva. Para seguir. Now, the role of public opinion. As stated, there are undeniably many policies coming from the current administration motivated by anti-Hispanic bias. However, one thing to note is that the United States population overwhelmingly opposes these policies. For example, 74% are in favor of granting legal status to the Dreamers, children who came to the United States without documentation. In fact, even a majority of Republicans are in favor of such status, despite the fact that the current administration revoked it. And regarding the border wall, the majority of the country is opposed to it, 60%. Even a majority of white people, 53%, are against it, not to speak of the opposition among blacks and Hispanics. Cuando analizamos la opinión popular, podemos ver que hay mucha oposición en contra de las acciones anti-hispanas que vienen de la administración actual. Por ejemplo, la gran mayoría del público estadounidense está a favor del estatus legal para los Dreamers, aunque los republicanos, y al mismo tiempo, cuando analizamos la opinión sobre la pared en la frontera entre México y los Estados Unidos, la mayoría de la población está en contra, 60%, aunque una mayoría de los blancos está en contra, y los negros y hispanos también. Y esto y eventualmente las políticas necesitan reflejar la opinión de la población, y aunque la administración actual es una excepción. So eventually the policies of the country have to somewhat reflect the public opinion, which, as we can see, is far more positive than what we've seen over the past couple of years in terms of policies. And this would entail more progress towards a society that has more recognition of Spanish and multiculturalism in general than what we see now. And for that reason, we have reasons to be optimistic. Thank you very much for listening. And if you have questions, comments, or criticisms, feel free to post in the comments. Have a good day.